Hello everyone, my name is Imake with Gaming Daddy and I'm here with another video from Clancy's The Division. Now, one of the biggest things about developing a video game is developing systems that are familiar to players. And if in the case of The Division 2, a developer is developing a sequel, it is always nice to develop some old mechanics that are going to pretty much help the returning players and the veterans to feel the game and warm up really fast to the game. So in this video, instead of bringing you all the changes that have been made, I'm bringing you guys some of the mechanics that are returning from the Division 1 to the Division 2. So these are things you're going to see the moment you log in and start playing and are going to really help your learning curve a lot better, because psychologically you're going to feel at home if you are very cognizant with the systems already in place. So let's take a look at these. Now, the first one, as depicted by the thumbnail of this video, is Isaac.exe. Now, Isaac.exe is a personal computerized system, kind of like a Pocket Buddy that gives you warnings, notifications, and directives. Examples of Isaac.exe's usefulness is in notifying you when you've entered a new geographical location like the Dark Zone, or in the case of the Division 2, Isaac is going to notify you when you've entered a landmark. Now, as depicted in the gameplay footage, we also saw that Isaac was actually doing a lot more than just its normal functionalities in the Division 1, and so it's going to be exciting to see how this is actually executed in the Division 2. The second mechanism that's coming to the Division 2 is the cover-to-cover run mechanism. Now, in the Division 1, this system was one of my favorites, and it got a lot of spotlight in PvE because this action actually had some skills and a gear set talent tied to it. So you could do the run to cover mechanism to trigger some other skills, or use it during when Nimble was actually a viable gear set. Eventually, that got changed. A lot of that stuff got nerfed because a lot of people cried, but we're going to see cover-to-cover mechanics come back, and I don't know if the developers are going to tie that in with any skills. Hopefully they do, because they want to encourage us to use cover a lot more, and so I'm excited to actually see that mechanic come back. The third mechanic that's returning is a supply drop system. The supply drop system is a reward system that's there in order to provide immediate gear and weapons for players. Now, the Dark Zone has its own supply drops, and the Division 2 will introduce some new systems and ways in which they're going to be implemented, where they're not going to be enemies in the Dark Zone supply drop and you just have to make your way there and compete to get them. Now, we haven't heard anything about the PvE side of things regarding supply drops, but in the Division 1, season pass holders were able to receive one supply drop every week, and so we don't know if that's going to be implemented that way or if the developers have some other ideas up their sleeves. Eventually, we'll find out. The next one is loot chests. These are mechanics that hold gear and is one of the biggest centralities to the Division's loot system. Now, the loot chests are still going to maintain the requirements that agents use a Dark Zone key to access them and get their contents, but in addition to that, there's going to be a twist. An agent can now pick the lock of these loot chests in order to try to get the gear regardless, but this is going to trigger a rogue status. It's not necessarily a manhunt status, but it's one of those rogue status that actually shows that you're not yet a deadly agent, but you've done something against the current parameters with shade agents. The fifth mechanic that's returning to the Division 2 is Dark Zone currency and shade tech. Now, I've jumbled these two together because when you're running in the Dark Zone and performing Dark Zone activities, you're going to be getting Dark Zone XP, and in certain instances, one of your rewards for some of the things that you're going to do is also getting shade tech, like if you open up supply drops and get the gear from there, if you take down a boss, or if you clear out a landmark, these things can come with the Dark Zone XP. Now, watching the gameplay videos, it's evident that there's going to be a Dark Zone XP structure to help level up agents who enter and participate in the Dark Zone. In the past, the Dark Zone XP was a requirement to make purchases from the Dark Zone vendors, and also was used as a risk-reward attribute to reward players who successfully completed Dark Zone activities or punish players who died in the Dark Zone. In addition to Dark Zone XP, this shade tech is a rare resource, something that you have to actually work for or farm in a sense in the Division 1, and the purpose of your shade tech was actually in using to optimize your gear and your weapons. Now, I think the same purpose is probably going to be implemented in the Division 2, because I think this is going to be a natural progression, and so we may see an optimization station, perhaps something that you'll be able to unlock in the end game at your base of operations to make these shade tech worth farming for. The next functionality functionality is the pulse. Now, having seen the gameplay footage in the Dark Zone, it would appear that players will have the option to use pulse as a skill. However, from what we've heard, it seems that the pulse is going to have no enemy damage effects attached to it, and so its only task is going to be to scan and detect enemy agents or AI in your vicinity. So this brings us to damage numbers and variations. Now, this is one that I've wondered about, especially with the new shortened time to kill being very different from the Division 1, but nonetheless, I was able to spot these differences that I was looking at with the different damage numbers. So headshot damage and critical hit chance and other kinds of damage are going to show their numbers in their different colorations respectively. Now, this is very important when you're min-maxing your gear and you are at a firing range, in order to check how much damage your skills in conjunction with your weapons and your talents are doing. It's nice to always be able to see those numbers and the damage. This is an RPG, so it's really nice to know how much damage you're doing and know what your numbers are exactly. And another bonus one that's going to be coming back to the Division is our emotes. There isn't really much to say here. I'm really happy that the jumping jacks are coming back and they're free. They're actually my favorite. And so they're probably going to be monetized in a sense, but I'm hoping not. And we can get all of them or find a way to probably even work for them like the Division game. You could farm them in a sense, and you could also just purchase them. Now, number 9 on the list for me is the suppression system. All of you know that I'm a big PvE player, and so suppression systems are something that I actually have always enjoyed in the Division because they come in quite handy for players who play my style of gameplay. I love to play the support gameplay, and so my job is to assess a situation and know exactly how to deal with enemies or exactly how to help my teammates. So I'm excited to see how the suppression mechanism is actually in there in the Division 2, and I want to know exactly what triggers them. In the Division 1, LMGs almost always trigger the enemies to actually be suppressed and hide in cover, and sometimes that was maybe frustrating, but you never know. With the way the enemy damage is in the Division 2 from the gameplay that we've seen, it seems like we're going to need the enemy to actually get into cover from time to time so that we can catch our breath. So I'm really excited that there's a way we can put a hurting on these NPCs and put them in their place. The final mechanic that's coming back in my list is the on fire, stagger, and shock mechanics. Now, I threw all these in one big bunch because I wanted to keep my list at 10, but we all know that the on fire mechanic is coming back, and apparently, from what we've seen, you can still carry out some functionality while you're on fire and trying to put out the fire. So you're not necessarily locked into this trying to quench the flames off of your clothes. You can also carry out some other actions while you're still on fire. And then we also have the stagger mechanism. Now, this is not the shotgun stagger mechanisms because the developers have actually said that this is going to change after the game is released. And so we're talking about the turrets at the checkpoints, which stagger and also shock you if you're a rogue agent and trying to camp at a checkpoint. Now, some PvP players have expressed their disdain at these shock turrets and stagger turrets that are at the checkpoints because they envision a scenario where somebody will camp at the checkpoints and depend on these turrets in order to help them fight and take down rogues. In my opinion, I say it is the Dark Zone. There is no way things should be fair in the Dark Zone. So that's a classic PvP player response. And so I guess I'm throwing those words back at those who would actually complain about that, because the turrets at the checkpoints were actually one of the changes that the community requested. And so those are all the items that I have on my list today. I just wanted to bring these 10 to you. There are a lot more mechanics returning to the Division 2, but these ones are the ones that have actually stood out to me in terms of PvP and PvE. Either way, leave your gameplay mechanics that you've seen that are returning in the comment section. That's open for you guys to do. I could go there and sit down and make a list of everything, but I want you in on the conversation. That's all I have for today. I guess I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you very much for your time and your audience, and I guess I'll see you. Peace.